Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's call with Congressman Mike Levin. Now, during this event, we'll be taking questions from constituents like you. To ask a question, please press star 3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. You can also sign up for the Congressman's newsletter by pressing star 6 at any time during this call. So again, press star 3 to ask a question or star 6 to subscribe to our newsletter. And with that, I'll turn it over to Congressman Levin. Congressman, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, good evening. I'm Congressman Mike Levin, your representative for California's 49th Congressional District, covering North County, San Diego, and South Orange County. You know, when I was first elected in 2018, I made a commitment to you to hold monthly town halls throughout my time in Congress, and I've kept that promise. I've held more than 100 town halls so I can hear directly from constituents. Thank you for calling in and for joining me tonight. I host in-person, telephone, and virtual town halls for all constituents who wish to attend and ask questions. The different formats work well for different people. I'm currently in my third 2-year term as your member of Congress, and it is a privilege to serve you. In Washington, D.C., I'm working hard to lower health care costs, keep our communities safe, protect Social Security and Medicare, tackle the climate crisis, ensure veterans get the benefits they deserve, protect reproductive rights, and safeguard our democracy. I'm honored to fight for our district in Congress and deliver results that improve our quality of life. To ask a question, press star 3 at any time. To subscribe to my newsletter, press star 6. Tonight's town hall will focus on Social Security, and I'm glad we're joined by my guest, Max Rickman, the President and CEO of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, one of the nation's most influential senior advocacy and education membership organizations. Max is an expert on the issues facing Social Security and what is needed to protect this important program. He also has valuable insight and perspective on what lies ahead. Welcome, Max.
Thank you very much, Congressman.
Before I take your questions, I want to address some of the pressing issues facing our nation and recent victories for our district. First is the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. I've been clear in my position that I support a ceasefire paired with the immediate release of all the hostages held by Hamas. This conflict must end, and the hostages must be released, and there is no question that Hamas has to be defeated. I'd like to see new leadership in Israel and Gaza. We need leaders who support a two-state solution and are willing to move away from the status quo in order to improve the lives of their people. I've followed the news in Israel closely, and it looks like they could be having elections sooner than anticipated. That's ultimately a decision for their democracy, but one that I certainly welcome. Here at home, I'm proud to report on some recent accomplishments for our district that will improve the quality of life for all residents. In the recent government funding package enacted in March, I secured over $17 million for 15 local projects to make road improvements, upgrade water infrastructure, strengthen public safety, and more. A top priority of mine is delivering federal funds to address local issues and invest in projects that uplift all the communities in our district. Since coming to Congress in 2019, I've secured over $877 million in federal funding for projects up and down our district. To learn more about these projects and see which ones are in your area, please visit levin.house.gov. Just in time for summer, you'll be glad to know that the sand replenishment projects in Encinitas and Solana Beach are now complete. These projects, which were made possible with federal funds I secured, added over 1 million cubic yards of sand to the beach to improve recreational opportunities, protect against coastal erosion, and boost the local economy. Another sand replenishment project is currently underway in San Clemente, and the first phase of this project is wrapping up in the coming days, again secured with federal funds. I look forward to seeing you out on the beach this summer. Additionally, I've heard from many of you about your concerns over the recent incident of an unidentified boat landing in Carlsbad. It was unacceptable, and it's part of a larger maritime border security problem. I took immediate action and pushed Speaker Mike Johnson to bring a maritime border security bill to the House floor for a vote. And a couple weeks ago, the House overwhelmingly passed this bill to strengthen U.S. Customs and Border Protection's capabilities to protect our nation's maritime borders by extending customs waters from 12 to 24 nautical miles. This expanded jurisdiction will allow CBP's air and marine operations, and believe me, they are the best, to respond more quickly and effectively to emerging threats in our waters, such as suspect vessels. I hope the Senate will take this legislation up quickly now that it's passed the House. As a reminder, press star 3 at any time to ask a question. Press star 6 to subscribe to my newsletter. Congress is facing many other issues that require us to act. Reproductive rights, from abortion access to IVF, are under attack. Women's lives are on the line, and we must codify Roe v. Wade into federal law to ensure women have access to the medical care they need. Also, Congress will face another round of government funding negotiations this summer and will need to pass a funding package by the end of September for fiscal year 2025. If extremists dominate negotiations, we'll face the threat of a government shutdown that could impact services and benefits for millions of Americans, including Social Security. And that's our focus this evening. Social Security faces challenges that must be addressed to ensure future retirees get the benefits they've paid into their entire lives. Since 1935, Social Security has been an essential resource for retired Americans, allowing them to enjoy their golden years. According to the Social Security Administration, most people 65 years old and above receive the majority of their income from Social Security. The poverty rate among Americans older than 65 is 10.3%, but without Social Security, it would be nearly 38%. Essentially, Social Security keeps more than 15 million seniors out of poverty. But House Republicans have proposed raising the retirement age to force Americans to work longer while pulling the rug out from people who've paid into the program their entire lives. I think this is severely misguided. Raising the retirement age for Americans who are currently 59 years old and younger would cut Social Security benefits for 590,000 people in our congressional district alone, forcing them to work longer for less. In total, over 30 million people in California would see their Social Security benefits cut under this plan. Since Social Security is a contributory system funded entirely by its beneficiaries through the payroll tax, its benefits are tied to lifetime contributions. So what is a better plan than what the Republicans are proposing in the House? Well, I support applying the payroll tax on earnings above $400,000 to ensure everyone is paying their fair share into the system. This is part of what we call the Social Security 2100 Act. It's a comprehensive bill to increase Social Security benefits and ensure the program is fiscally sound for future generations. I'm a co-sponsor of the bill, and I'd like to see it come to the House floor for a vote as soon as possible. Now I'll turn it over to Max for his remarks on Social Security. Please press star 3 at any time to ask a question. Max?
Well, thank you so much, Congressman. Just for your constituents who may not be familiar with our organization, the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare was founded about 40 years ago by a former congressman from California by the name of James Roosevelt. And he was worried about what the future held for Social Security and wanted to preserve what he believed was his father's greatest legacy. And his father was President Roosevelt, who created the Social Security program. So for 40 years, we've been living by that commitment to preserve and protect Social Security and Medicare as well. Before I mention a couple of issues, I just wanted to, again, thank you, really from the bottom of my heart, for the faith you have in the National Committee to bring facts to your constituents. I don't know many members of Congress that have had the chair of our board out there in your district about 18 months ago. As you know, I was there in early December, and I'm with you and your constituents this evening. So I really appreciate, again, what I think is a commitment that you have shown to protecting these programs. The plan that you talked about has been endorsed by the Republican Study Committee, the plan to cut benefits, raise the retirement age, reduce benefits across the board. And keep in mind, the Republican Study Committee represents over 80% of Republican members of Congress and the entire leadership. So that's their choice for looking at the future of Social Security. You are absolutely correct. The program faces challenges. We saw the trustees of Social Security issue a report a couple months ago. The program can pay full benefits until 2035, a year longer than what was predicted last year. If nothing happens, there will be a reduction in benefits, pretty dramatic, about 17%. We can't let that happen. I know you're not going to let that happen. First of all, people should understand this program is not bankrupt. After this report came out, we heard a lot of scaremongering. Social Security's broke, bankrupt. That's not true. It has challenges that I've just discussed, need to be addressed in a reasonable, deliberate, but not a reckless way. And the path that you have shown for improving and protecting and preserving Social Security, as you mentioned, is the Social Security 2100 Act. That not only brings more revenue into the program in a fair way by applying the payroll tax to those earning above $400,000 a year, but improves benefits at the same time, really meaningful benefits involving the windfall elimination provision, improving extra benefits for oldest retirees, has a more accurate and generous cost of living adjustment, a COLA. I'm sure every one of your constituents who's a Social Security beneficiary knows what the COLA is and watches that announcement every fall. This bill that you support would do just that. So I'm going to stop there. I know we've got a lot of questions. Congressman, you'll remember when I was out there in December, I gave you a pair of red boxing gloves, right, to fight for seniors.
I remember. I have them. I'm proud.
I hope you keep them. I hope you keep them handy in case you need them.
Well, I appreciate that, Max. Thank you so much, and I appreciate all your insight and all your leadership. And to the extent that our callers have questions about Social Security, I will turn them to you as an expert in the field. And with that, Dirk, now let's turn it over to the callers for their questions.
Absolutely. Just a very quick reminder, if you have a question that you'd like to ask during this call, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. Again, get involved in our discussion by pressing *3. Going out to Dana Point first, we've got Susan on the line with us. Susan, you are live on the call. Go ahead with your question now. Hello, Susan, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought she was just going to. Anyway, yes, on Medicare with the supplement, it keeps going up and up and up, and I'm blessed to not be strictly on Social Security, but my Medicare and supplement and my deduction or whatever it is with all the prescriptions, I'm paying more now than I did with the private. So it's like they're working it backwards, and they just raise and raise and raise the supplement.
Well, thank you so much for that, Susan. I can tell you that we've been working very hard in Congress on this issue for some time to address the high cost of prescription drugs. And we were able to pass the Inflation Reduction Act. And the name is a little bit misleading because there's so much in there for a variety of different things. But one of the things that it tries to do is really tackle prescription drugs. And this is the first time that we've been able to get a deal to have Medicare actually negotiate the price of certain drugs. It's going to start out fairly modestly with 10 different drugs, and then it's going to be expanded from there. But we're already seeing the impact of this on prescription drug costs. Not to mention that in the bill is $35 insulin for all those on Medicare. We know that that's going to roughly cut the cost of insulin in half for a lot of people. We're talking serious savings, hundreds of dollars a year for insulin. And it's very simple. We should not have any drug company jacking up the price of something like insulin that's been around for, literally 100 years. I've been encouraged also that some of the private companies that irrespective of Medicare, have embraced $35 insulin for all customers, all patients. That's a great, great thing. The last thing is directly related to what you just said. We have, starting next year, a $2,000 out-of-pocket maximum for Medicare prescription drugs. And, right now, people in our district and around the country are paying $8,000, $9,000 and more for prescription drugs under Medicare. Under this new legislation that will take effect next year, that will be $2,000 a year out-of-pocket maximum. I wish it were already in effect. Obviously, I'd love to be able to address the challenges that you're facing today, Susan, but nonetheless, help is on the way, and I'm very proud to have supported and co-sponsored that initiative.
All right, our next caller is Shirley in Encinitas. Shirley, you are live with Congressman Levin. What's your question?
Well, mine has to do with climate, although I must thank you for your work on Social Security and Medicare. But mine has to do with the global warming issue and the fact that people just don't seem to be aware of their carbon emissions from their own vehicles. There are so many things that we can do, each of us, to help reduce those carbon emissions. I walk a great deal all around Encinitas and wherever I go, and I notice in parking lots that people are running their engines while they're parked. They're idling. They're on their phones mostly. I have noticed people eating lunch or meals in their cars or sitting and waiting for somebody at the ATM or in a grocery store for 20 or 30 minutes with the engine running. It just seems like they're not educated. Isn't there something you can do about getting PSAs out to help educate people? There's so many PSAs that we're bombarded with all the time. Why not about carbon emissions? When I was in Vancouver, BC, they have signs posted in parking lots that have an ordinance that says no engine idling. Can't we in California do something?
Well, I certainly appreciate your comments and your question, Shirley. And, obviously at the state level or the local level, different things could be done. But I can tell you what I'm working very hard on at the federal level, and that's having introduced legislation to reduce emissions from the transportation sector by encouraging the transition to zero-emission vehicles. I think that's critically important. And, it's one of several things that I'm trying to do to address climate change. Last Congress, you may know, we passed the biggest climate law in U.S. history to tackle climate change. It's going to reduce emissions. It's ultimately going to lower consumer costs, and it's going to drive the global clean energy economy forward. And I'm very excited about that. I also have some resources available on my website. If you're thinking about making climate-friendly upgrades to your home, your vehicle, you can visit levin.house.gov, and you can read all about the tax credits and the rebates that are going to help you save money. And that's thanks to that bill. And it happens to be the same bill that I mentioned to the last caller, which is the Inflation Reduction Act. So again, it included some very significant wins on prescription drugs and insulin, but also happens to be the biggest climate law in U.S. history. Now, let me say another thing. I'm also working with my friend Sean Casson from Illinois to improve our electricity grid, to ensure that we can move all the clean, cheap, renewable energy from where it's produced to the homes where it's needed, and to help our grid meet the demand, the increased demand that will come from things like electric vehicles and ultimately economy-wide electrification. Sean and I are co-chairs of something called the Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition, SEEC for short, and we introduced a bill called CETA, the Clean Electricity and Transmission Acceleration Act, and that improves many things, but really it's all about speeding up the permitting process for renewable energy and transmission and ensuring that impacted communities have a seat at the table. The last thing I'll say, very important to me, we live in a beautiful coastal environment, and I am fighting to protect our Southern California coast from new oil and gas development. And we got very close to doing that in the last Congress. Unfortunately, Senator Manchin from West Virginia at the last minute decided to take that out of the Senate's version. But we actually passed that provision in the House to ban drilling off the Southern California coast, and I won't stop until that is done.
So once again, please press *3 if you would like to ask a question live on this call. And our next question comes from Jacqueline in Vista. Jacqueline,
No,
what
I
would
did
you like
not.
to know? Hello, Jackie.
Hey, I think my cheek did that. I have no question to ask at this moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. We're going to be moving forward here, and we're moving to Carlsbad now. We got Mark joining us on the line. Hello, Mark. What's on your mind?
Hello, Congressman. I'm looking at the changes that are proposed for income tax and trying to get away from those Trump tax changes that supposedly only benefited certain people, and I understand trying to get some equity in that. Many people in the district here were hurt by those changes because of the SALT cap of $10,000. I'd like to see that cap removed because I can tell you personally, and many other people I know have actually paid more in taxes since those changes because our state and local taxes are so high here, our property taxes are high here, and states like California, New Jersey, New York really get impacted negatively by that. And I'm wondering why that hasn't been included or discussed.
Well, thank you so much for the question, Mark. And I can tell you that it's certainly not for our lack of trying. It has been really hard to get the Republicans on board with removing the cap or increasing the cap because it would undo a provision in the 2017 Trump tax bill. You may remember that it's been the basic bargain of the federal tax system for over 100 years to allow the full deductibility for all state and local taxes off your federal tax bill. And the cap of $10,000 when it was put in place really hurt a lot of folks in our district, and not rich people. That's another thing that I hear sometimes, oh, the SALT cap only hurt the rich, and that's just not true. If you're a homeowner in our district, which 62% of our district owns a home, you probably are hitting that cap just by virtue of your property taxes. And so we have to address this and do all we can on a bipartisan basis, I hope. Now, I'll go back and tell you what we've done since 2019, since I've been in the Congress. First, we passed a standalone bill, largely on geographic lines. So usually things around here are voted on ideological lines. This particular bill was on geographic lines. And people from the coastal states, folks from California and New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, we all voted, along with some of our friends from around the country who believe in the basic fairness. You know, California and other states pay in just about as much as they take out. We pay as much into the federal treasury as we take out, where there are other states, I'm thinking of Kentucky because Mitch McConnell is a great example, where they pay less in and get more out from the federal government. So we got that bill passed in the House, but the Senate wouldn't even consider it. This is back in 2019. Then, as part of negotiations around what became the Inflation Reduction Act, we had included a provision in our Build Back Better plan that would have increased the SALT deductibility to $80,000 for 9 years. So we got it up to 80, from 10 to 80. Now, that sure would have been a big relief for a lot of people, that $80,000 instead of the 10. That got killed at the last minute, again, by Republicans in the Senate and unfortunately, by Senator Manchin. I don't mean to pick on him today, but he killed that provision as well because, again, West Virginia is not one of those states that is as impacted by the SALT cap. Then we created a SALT caucus on a bipartisan basis. Now, there are Republicans from California and New York who work very closely with us on this, and boy, have we been trying. But I will tell you, it's been very, very tough to get Mike Johnson to move anything with regard to SALT. We're going to keep at it, whether it's our annual spending or any tax bills that come up or any other must-pass legislation. We're going to keep at it. Now, the good news for you is that at the end of 2025, this provision is set to expire and full deductibility would return. But if Trump is back in office or if Republicans hold the Congress, I think there will be a push by some to keep it in place. In fact, I've even heard the threat from some Republicans to cut the SALT cap in half again to $5,000. That's not an idle threat. I've heard that, and we have to prevent that from happening. So I will tell you, it is among many, many things that you'll be voting on this November will be what happens to the future of the SALT deductibility. And my hope is that it expires completely or that we're able to come to some sort of bipartisan agreement to dramatically raise the cap. But I thank you so much for the question. It's very, very much on my mind all the time. Thank you.
So our next question comes from Elizabeth in San Clemente. Elizabeth, welcome to the call. You're live with Congressman Levin.
Hello, good evening. Thank you, Congressman Levin, for all of your work in our region. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
My question is a question and concern regarding our local beaches. I know you mentioned earlier the sand replenishment project that is moving forward here in San Clemente, and also the one that was just completed in Encinitas and Solana Beach. As you're probably aware, San Clemente has faced some struggles with our coastal rail line due to erosion as well as some landslides. And there's a movement to reinforce the tracks, which would essentially mean burying our beaches under large boulders, otherwise known as riprap. And unfortunately, it seems as though they're able to evade environmental review for this project under claimed emergency permitting. My question is, because this is also has a federal nexus under Army Corps and Clean Water Act permits as well, I'm wondering if there's anything we can do to try to halt this project before irreparable damage is done to our beaches. And I absolutely support mass transit. However, at this point, I think we're looking at sort of a mutually exclusive, unfortunately, in this stretch. Because the local rail authorities have not taken action previously to realign this segment, we're at a point now where further reinforcement on the beaches is basically going to wipe out the entire beach. So it's sort of a question and concern there. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that question and for your thoughtful comments, Elizabeth. And I couldn't agree with you more. You know, I have tried to be focused on three things. The first is sand. We need sand up and down our beaches where it makes sense. You know, there's some great research out there from Brett Sanders, he's a professor at UC Irvine, and others as well, about where along our coast it makes the most sense for sand replenishment. It doesn't work as well in certain places as others. But I'm very proud that after many years, in fact decades, of the Army Corps not being able to get these projects done, that we finally got them funded. And that happened as a result of the bipartisan infrastructure law, which we passed back in 2021, and also as a result of community project funding. So I was able to secure about $40 million for both Encinitas, Solana Beach, and San Clemente, and I think there'll be opportunity for more projects in more places down the road. You know, I'll also say not only did we secure that money, but we secured a 50-year commitment from the Army Corps of Engineers to do the necessary sand replenishment work on a 5 or 6 or 10-year basis, depending on the project, as needed. And so this is a 50-year commitment. This is a great thing that will buy us some time. Second is we need stabilization. There are certain places along the low sand corridor connecting San Diego to LA, the Del Mar Bluffs immediately come to mind, where you do need stabilization, and stabilization also in the sense that we need upgrades to some key infrastructure. You know, for one example, we were able to secure about $54 million in federal funds for North County Transit District to replace a bridge, the San Dieguito Bridge, over by the Del Mar Fairgrounds, that is a 108-year-old bridge. So, you know, that's a really important infrastructure improvement. And I'm really happy that the low sand corridor was selected for something called the Corridor ID program. That's a Federal Railroad Administration program that identifies the highest risk, most vulnerable rail corridors across the United States, so that we can best position ourselves for federal funding in years to come, whether under the multimodal discretionary grant program or other programs. So, look, I'll just say we still have a long way to go. I am concerned, just as you are, that we can't just put riprap up and down the coast. We saw what happened down at Cotton's Point, Cypress Shores area, where the riprap basically, after it was put in, pretty much eliminated the beaches that were there. And I remember as a kid there being wide sandy beaches with beach volleyball and all the rest. And just up the coast in Capitol Beach, I remember going as a kid and having a nice basketball court and public restrooms, and all that's gone. All that's gone now. And it's personal to me because I'm a resident and because I'm from there and from South OC, and I want to see beaches just like you do. It's hard to have a beach town without beaches. It's hard to have a coastal tourism-based economy without beaches. And ultimately, we have about 140,000 tourism jobs in Orange and San Diego County alone directly related to coastal tourism. So it's a very big deal to me. I'll keep all of the coastal projects as a top priority. And the last thing I'll mention is we got to be thinking about stakeholder engagement. So OCTA and SANDAG need to do everything possible to try to achieve consensus in the community. That's the case whether it's down in Del Mar, where they're talking about potential relocation and a potential tunnel through parts of the corridor in Del Mar, or up in San Clemente and throughout South OC. And I was able to secure a $4 million grant for the OCTA to conduct what they're calling the Coastal Rail Corridor Relocation Study. And what that's going to do is look at the possibility for a longer-term rail line relocation along the coast to an inland alignment. And obviously the details of that would have to be ironed out. And I live not far in San Juan Capistrano, and I'll tell you, it's top of mind for me. So I very much appreciate your engagement on it. Keep connected to our office about it, and we look forward to many more discussions in the years ahead.
Well, thank you to everybody for joining us during this live telephone town hall with your Congressman Mike Levin. Now, the technology we're using today allows us to do polling and register instant responses from participants. So with that information, I'd like your response to the following question. Please use your telephone keypad to respond. Are you concerned about the Republicans' proposal to raise the retirement age? Press 1 for yes. Press 2 for no. Again, are you concerned about the Republicans' proposal to raise the retirement age? Press 1 for yes. Press 2 for no. I see a number of people are registering their opinion. Thank you very much for taking part in that poll. And don't forget, if you've got a question you'd like to ask live on this call, please press star 3 to enter the question queue. Next up, we've got Alexandra in Encinitas. Alexandra, you're live on the call. Go ahead with your question now.
Hi, Congressman. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You were talking about the bill you were sponsoring relating to Social Security. I believe in 1983 is when the tax cap was implemented. You also talked about raising something to over $400,000. What about working to scrap the payroll tax cap in its entirety, number one? And number two, are there any co-sponsors from the Republican Party that might join you in your what you're trying to do? Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that question. I'm going to turn it over to Max, who's been patiently waiting, who is an expert, genuine subject matter expert on all of this. Max, you want to tackle those questions?
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Congressman. Before I do that, let me just go back to the great answer you gave to the prescription drug cost that will be lowered by the Inflation Reduction Act. I think you made a point that really struck home with me when you said help is on the way. This is going to be a process. As you pointed out, 10 drugs are covered by the negotiation ability of the federal government. The first year, more will be added, many more will be added down the line. So I hope your constituents and beneficiaries of Medicare across the country will be a little patient. I know that's a lot to ask, but this is going to take a few years for people to feel the full impact and the relief they're going to get by lower prescription drug costs. And you also mentioned the cap that goes into effect, out-of-pocket cap next year of $2,000. It's a little over $3,000 this year. It'll, as you said, be $2,000 next year. So help is definitely on the way. As to Social Security, the bill that you support, the Social Security 2100 Act, has so many dramatic improvements in the program. It has an increase across the board of 2% for all beneficiaries. Has a more accurate and generous cost of living adjustment. You know, the COLA, it was pretty good the last couple of years. We had such high inflation, But out of the 11 last 11 or 12 years, the COLA was zero. That's laughable. Seniors know the formula is flawed when they're not getting any increase in those years or a very small increase, and their cost of living has gone up dramatically. I know you have constituents that are impacted by the windfall elimination provision, the government pension offset that applies to employment that was not covered by Social Security. That is dealt with by your legislation. The caller asked about the cap. I think as an issue that we have worked on for a long time, scrap the cap is something many groups have supported. I don't think that's realistic right now. What is realistic is what you have supported. Keeping the cap at what it is, it's about $168,000 a year now. It goes up a little bit every year, but starting to collect payroll taxes again at wages above $400,000 and above. And if that happens, eventually that cap that goes up a little bit every year will disappear and people will pay payroll taxes across the board. So to me, that's the fairest way to bring more revenue into the program, to pay for the improvements that I just mentioned and others in the legislation that you support, the Social Security 2100 Act, and provide a level of security for those people that keep being bombarded with these scare-mongering tactics that Social Security is broke, it's bankrupt, it's not going to be there. This legislation that you support will make sure this program is better and is there for decades and decades to come for everybody.
Thank you so much, Max.
So if you're enjoying this update, I encourage you to press *6 on your telephone now to get signed up for Congressman Levin's newsletter. Again, press *6 to get enrolled in the Congressman's e-newsletter. And with that, let's go for our next question. We've got Daryl in Oceanside. Daryl, welcome to the call. Go ahead with your question, please.
Thank you. My question is that with Social Security, I'm a retired veteran, did 20 years, 3 months, 26 days, 42 minutes, and 30 seconds of active duty. And I still work full time. I'm turning 72 this year. My concern is that I know I'm continuing to pay into Social Security, but my biggest worries is that I hear and I see there's a lot of Social Securities being contributed to people that have never even put one dime in it. And my question is that do you have a plan to confirm that the people that are getting Social Security, there's a lot of people out there just want to be treated fairly and get what they paid into. But the ones that are getting it, that it hasn't paid a dime in it, is there a plan that you have or a suggestion of how that we can track of that the Social Security is going to the real people that are paying for it?
Well, first, Daryl, let me thank you for your service. I really appreciate your comments and a belated Happy Armed Forces Day from last week. For the specific comment about fraud, I am incredibly concerned about any sort of fraud, whether Social Security or otherwise. We need to do everything we can to crack down on it. And I will turn it over to Max for any other thoughts or comments he may have.
Yes, thank you very much, Congressman. You know, it's a concern I've heard across the country. There are a lot of myths about Social Security, and one of the, I think, worst ones is that there are a lot of people, particularly undocumented workers, receiving Social Security. That is wrong. That is not true. In order to receive a Social Security benefit, you have to, first of all, you have to be employed in a job that is covered by Social Security for 10 years, 40 quarters. Then you are eligible to receive benefits. Now, I have read reports of undocumented workers getting benefits. That is not true. In fact, we recently became aware of a government study, investigation that showed that actually just the opposite is true. Oftentimes, undocumented workers are able to receive a phony number, a phony Social Security card to work, which means they're paying into Social Security, and their employer is paying into Social Security. So they pay in, but they can never collect. You cannot collect until you have a legitimate Social Security number. So just the opposite is happening. In fact, undocumented workers are adding to the Social Security surplus. They're paying into the program, and they cannot receive benefits. The fraud exists all over, but fraud is very, very low in the Social Security program.
Thank you, Max. Dirk, back to you.
Thank you very much. Our next question comes from Walter in Oceanside. Walter, you're live with Congressman Levin. What's on your mind?
Good evening. Thank you.
Hi there.
Yes. Hi. I was wondering about the Social Security and how it's actually financially structured in the federal government. Is there a lockbox on it? Do we know that the $400,000 is going to be going into the Social Security, or does it go into the general fund and they write an IOU? And how does that structure? We know it's going to work in the future.
Well, you brought up memories of Al Gore, Walter. I remember Al Gore and George W. Bush years ago in the lockbox. But Max, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, we may need a couple more hours on this call to explain all of this. Social Security is funded by the payroll tax, only by the payroll tax, by law. That money that employers and employees put into the program goes into what's called the Social Security Trust Fund. There is no lockbox. There is no vault somewhere in West Virginia filled with trillions of dollars in cash. That wouldn't make any sense. The money that's paid in beyond what is paid out in benefits is invested in government bonds. It earns interest. It rolls over regularly. The program receives the interest on those bonds regularly. So what bothers me so much, Congressman, is when I hear people talk about these are IOUs. These are not slips of paper with Mike Levin's name written on them or Max Richmond's. These are government bonds that are held by the government, have the full faith and credit backing of the U.S. government. And one of the best ways I think I have found to explain this is during the worst of COVID, when we had such high unemployment, less money was paid into the Social Security program than was needed to pay everybody their full benefits. But guess what? Everybody got their benefits. No one was shorted it on their Social Security benefits. Why? The program had interest paid on the bonds, and during those years, during COVID, when not enough money came in payroll taxes to pay full benefits, not only did everybody get paid, but the size of the trust fund grew by the accrual of that interest. So I know it's a little complicated, but I think it's safe to believe that the program the money in the program pays for benefits, does not pay for other things, and I've tried to explain it the best way I can on your show.
I think you explained it very well. Go ahead, Dirk.
I apologize, sir. Our next caller comes from Carlsbad. It's Jan who's on the line with us now. Welcome, Jan. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, it's about Social Security. I was able to live on Social Security until COVID, but everybody used COVID, and still does, as an excuse for raising prices excessively. So since COVID, I have not been able to survive on Social Security, and I've had to go back to work. And that job is now not enough, and I might have to get a second one. Basing our payment increases on the COLA, which is not based on rent, utilities, or food, But on large ticket items that people like me can't afford, like cars and refrigerators, doesn't seem like it's a good way of doing the system every year's raise. Is there something that might happen in the future to improve the basis for the increases?
Jan, thank you so much for that question. Max, I'm going to turn it right around to you.
Well, I'm happy to answer that question. It's something I've worked on for a long time. You know, before I came to the Committee to Preserve Social Security, I was the Chief of Staff for the U.S. Senate Committee on Aging. And so I've been working on this COLA issue since the late 1980s. And it's about time that it was fixed. The legislation that you're sponsoring, the Social Security 2100 Act, would change the formula for determining what the COLA is. And your caller is so right on. The way the COLA is computed now looks at how inflation is affecting a wage earner from the third quarter of one year to the third quarter of the next year, and looks at those goods and services and the change in cost from one year to the next. That's not the way seniors spend money. That does not put the correct emphasis on those goods and services that seniors rely on. You know, Congressman, if the cost of living adjustment, the COLA, is supposed to keep a senior's cost up with inflation, you need to look at the kinds of things a senior buys, the services that they need, the things they depend on, the things that they spend their money on. So what this legislation that you support would do is change the formula so it's not based on the CPI, it's called the CPIW, Consumer Price Index for wage earners, but a Consumer Price Index for the elderly, CPIE. That would increase the COLA, not a lot maybe, but you know that COLA is compounded. So whatever you get one year is built into the base the next year. And over time, it will make a huge difference in the ability of seniors to keep up with inflation and to have a decent standard of living.
Thank you, Max.
So everyone on this call can stay up to date and informed by getting enrolled in the Congressman's e-newsletter. And you can do that right now by pressing *6 on your telephone keypad. So again, sign up for the Congressman's e-newsletter. Press *6 now on your telephone keypad. Back for another question. We've got Kevin in Carlsbad joining us. Kevin, you're live on the call. Go ahead with your question now. Hello, Kevin. Looks like Kevin might have dropped off.
No, sorry, I'm here.
There he is.
Thanks for taking my
call. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, it sounds like you did touch on GPO and WEP, and you are for eliminating those programs. What do you think the odds of getting the support on the Republican side for that to go through?
Well, I think that's hopefully something that I think by now we're very close to getting the 2/3 necessary to bring the bill to the floor under suspension. And let me take a step back, and then Max, you can talk about the technical details of the WEP GPO offset and why it's so important. But from the political standpoint, there are a few ways that a bill can pass the House. The simplest way is by majority vote after being approved in the Rules Committee. That's how a lot of bills move forward when you see them pass on a majority basis. The Rules Committee, though, because when Kevin McCarthy was becoming Speaker, he put a lot of folks on the Rules Committee that, let's just say, are not moderates. I'm trying to be as friendly as I can be. And so something like the WEP GPO offset has a cost associated with it, a fairly substantial one, and they probably wouldn't allow that to go through under a rule. Therefore, the second option is to suspend the rules and go to the floor, and that requires a 2/3 vote. Now, you can do the math. We have 435 members, assuming everybody's present and voting, so you'd need a good, solid number of people, well over 300, to pass something under suspension of the rules. and we're getting close on the WEP GPO offset. We're right around that 300, and there are good Republican and Democratic co-leads on the bill. With that, Max, maybe I'll turn to you just for an explanation of the WEP GPO offset and why it's so important.
Sure. Well, it's important because it's unfair to Social Security beneficiaries. Just to quickly explain it, the WEP, the windfall elimination provision, reduces Social Security benefits for a person who is eligible for a pension based on a job in which that person did not contribute to Social Security, but also is eligible for Social Security from additional employment. The government pension offset reduces the benefits to a spouse when the spouse did not pay Social Security on their employment earnings for part of their work history. So part of it may have been employment that was covered by Social Security and part not. So the penalty is imposed on those people, and their Social Security benefits are reduced, whether it's a spousal benefit or a benefit for directly to a beneficiary. It's unfair. It's really, I think, outrageous. It's been on the books for a very long time. Of course, the Social Security 2100 Act specifically gets rid of it, and that's the bill that you have sponsored. I hope you're right. I hope this can get over the finish line. And this is, by the way, as you point out, this is not a Republican or a Democratic problem. There are Republican members of Congress and Democratic members of Congress who have constituents that have been unfairly treated for a long time because of the government pension offset penalty or the windfall elimination provision penalty. So we have worked on this for quite a long time. I think it's got a lot of bipartisan support. Hopefully, before the Congress finishes this year, you can get it across the line.
I certainly hope that is the case. That'll ultimately be up to Speaker Johnson whether to advance it on suspension, and I hope he does.
All right, our next question comes from Joe in Carlsbad. Joe, welcome to the call. You're live. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, yes. Thank you. And thank you, Congressman Mike Levin. But my question is off topic, a little bit about the Veteran Administration.
Great.
And I've contacted you many times. I'm faced with multiple times of over 90-day wait period. And I was given a 150-day wait period for physical therapy. I contacted you, and I got no assistance. So, why is it, I'm going to be brutally honest. I don't like the GOP. I don't like the Democrats. Under Trump, it got better, but under Joe Biden, it has gotten worse.
Yep.
So why is that? Why is it, since he's been in office over 30 days, 90 days, 150-day wait period?
Yep.
Why is that? And you can't blame the Republicans because Joe Biden has been in office for, 4 years? There has to be accountability. You can't sit there and keep complaining and blame it on the Republicans. It's both fault.
Yes,
and
sir.
You claim you're a veteran advocate, but yet I request 150-day help with 150-day physical therapy, and you do nothing. Why is that? Tell me your best excuse.
I have no excuse, sir, other than to tell you it's unacceptable that you would ever have to wait anywhere near that long for VA health care. And I can tell you that our team will do everything they can right now. And I know that at least a couple of them are listening in to get back to you and see if we can't specifically address your wait time situation to help you. I can tell you that we have been discussing the wait times issue ever since I've been in Congress. That was true under Trump. It's true under Biden. There is a new bill that is being circulated and being discussed called the Schedules Act. It is a bipartisan, bicameral bill. And what it would say is that VA would have to establish a maximum time frame, a standard time frame for veterans to get specialized care after a referral. And again, it would mandate a maximum time frame for either in the VA system or an approved provider out of the VA system, and it would hold the VA to account for long delays in particularly the specialized care that their primary doctors are prescribing. And there is no question that we've got to do better than we're doing. I take your concern extraordinarily seriously, and I will tell you just a couple other things that I am proud of. One is that we just had a milestone of 1 million veterans receiving care who otherwise were not eligible prior to something called the PACT Act. For those who were serving, and particularly in the post-9/11 conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, who were exposed to burn pits and toxic substances, until previously, if they had a number of conditions, respiratory conditions or cancer, they were not guaranteed coverage. They were not presumed to be eligible for that coverage, and now they are as a result of the PACT Act. And just in our district alone, over 3,000 veterans are now eligible for that care. Now, to your question, Joe, it's worthless if people are having to wait 150 days. That's care that ultimately doesn't serve them well at all. So I'm going to take your comments back to my team, and we're going to reach back out to you, and we're going to make sure that we do all we can to specifically address your challenge and the challenge of all the other veterans who are similarly situated through legislation, if necessary. I would like to think that we could do it administratively and apply pressure as we have before. Whether it was Biden or Trump, this has been a big problem. Now, what I will tell you is that there are some people whose answer to the problem is to continue to undermine the VA and to try to privatize. And I don't think that's what we need to do. I think we need to provide options to people, but we need to strengthen the VA, not undermine it. And that's what I aim to do. On the Veterans Affairs Committee, I'm very proud of the bipartisan work we've done. Since I've been in Congress, we've passed over 30 bipartisan bills into law, and about 24 of them specifically pertain to veterans. I've been in charge of the Veterans Affairs Subcommittee on Economic Opportunity, where we've got jurisdiction over veteran housing, homelessness, the GI Bill, and quite a lot more. And specifically on the homelessness issue, that's something that is so close to home and so important to me. I've been really trying to address homeless veterans that have high service-connected disability ratings, making sure that they're not deemed ineligible for the permanent supportive housing that was designed for them because their disability compensation put them over the income limit tied to the housing project. I'm not going to give up. I know it's very frustrating. I can hear the frustration in your voice. I share it, and I'm going to do everything I can to address it.
So, Congressman, looking at the clock, I'm going to try and sneak in one final question here during this call, and that question is from Ronald in Vista. Ronald, you're live. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hello, Congressman Levin.
Hi there.
This is also slightly off topic, but some time ago you were concerned and working on the issue of disposal of the spent nuclear material at San Onofre. And I was wondering what's the latest on that?
Well, thank you. I can tell you we've never stopped. Ever since I took office in 2019, we've been working hard at it, and that's been the case straight through. In fact, earlier this evening, I was with my Republican co-lead on the Spent Nuclear Fuel Solutions Caucus, Chuck Fleischman, a Republican from Tennessee, and he and I were discussing a number of initiatives that we're undertaking together. You know, first thing I will tell you is that San Onofre and the waste that is there, the spent nuclear fuel that is there, is really the symptom of a larger problem. And the larger problem is that we have nowhere in the United States to send any commercial spent nuclear fuel from any facility. We have about 80 or 90 facilities across the country in about 34 states. And ever since the closure of the Yucca Mountain project in Nevada over a decade ago, we have had there has been no plan at the federal level until I got there. And literally and figuratively, I inherited a mess, an absolute mess. So what we did is we put together a group of community leaders and experts, co-chaired by the former head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and by a retired Navy admiral, to come together with recommendations for federal action. We took those recommendations and we have acted on all of them. One was to create that caucus I just mentioned of members from both parties to have a new generation of members of Congress dealing with spent nuclear fuel. Another was to introduce legislation to prioritize moving fuel once we figured out where we're going to move it all to, but prioritize the movement from those areas with the highest seismic risk, the highest population density, and the highest national security consideration. And I don't need to tell you, I'm sure you all know that we've got active earthquake faults, we've got 9 million people within 50 miles of San Onofre, and we've got one of the most important bases for the readiness and the preparation of our military at Camp Pendleton right across the freeway. We also have rising sea levels, by the way, so it's definitely not a good place to be storing spent nuclear fuel. So that bill, which I co-lead with Darrell Issa, would prioritize moving waste from sites like ours. Now, where would we move the waste to? Well, we were able to secure over these past number of years $140 million for the Department of Energy to restart a consent-based siting process. Now, why is consent so important? That is what was lacking at Yucca Mountain in Nevada, the consent of the Nevadans, whether it's their leadership or their congressional delegation. When you look in other countries like Finland and Canada and elsewhere, where have they been successful in moving spent nuclear fuel? They have achieved consent to the community that is willing to take the spent nuclear fuel for a variety of different reasons. So we've restarted that process with something called the Consent-Based Siting Initiative at the DOE. At the same time, I think political appointees come and go from the U.S. Department of Energy, and I think we need to be thinking long-term, and that's why I think we need to create an independent nuclear waste administration. This was an idea that Senator Feinstein, the late Senator Feinstein, had that was never acted upon, and I'd like to carry that forward and to do it on a bipartisan basis so that we get out of the political wave, the cyclical ups and downs of policy. It's going to take long-term thinking to solve this problem. It's something that is a top priority, a top issue for me, and will be very likely for as long as I will serve in Congress. I will tell you that we've got to get the waste off our beaches as quickly and as safely as we can. I am committed to doing that, and I thank everybody in the community for working with me on it.
So, Congressman, as I look at the clock, it's been a very informative hour plus. So I would like to call on you, sir, for some final thoughts.
Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody for your questions. Thank you for listening today. For those who are still on the line, I'm super grateful for that. And special thanks to Max for joining us tonight. He is such a tremendous resource, and it is such a great honor to get to work with him and the committee to do all we can to protect and strengthen Social Security and to fight those who would cut benefits or raise the retirement age or put in place other measures that would dramatically hurt the seniors in our district and throughout the country. I will also say if you weren't able to have your question answered, you can message me, and I encourage you to do so. Visit our website at levin.house.gov. Again, that's levin.house.gov. Our office is here to help with any issues you or your family might be having with the federal agency, such as the Department of Veterans Affairs, Social Security Administration, or the IRS. And you can also call my office at 760-599-5000 if we can be of help. Again, that's 760-599-5000. So thanks again for joining us, and have a great rest of your week.
Everyone, thank you for joining us for this live telephone town hall with Congressman Mike Levin. If you haven't spoken to a member of our team yet about subscribing to the Congressman's e-newsletter, simply stay on the line, and at the sound of the tone, spell out your name and email address slowly, and we'll get you enrolled. Thank you again. Have a great night.